Welcome to the Six Steel City Rings podcast. I'm your host, Ray Whiting. And with me, the gang is back. My fellow co-host, the First Lady, Leanne Lohman. I have Zach Franciscus, and I have the guru, Bob Quinn. Guys, how y'all doing?
Christmas morning.
Great.
Exciting day today.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Exciting day today. Look,
Yes.
training camp.
Training camp is well underway, but before we go into in depth into training camp, we got some breaking news. Leanne, what you got?
Yep, we got just a few topics that arose today with the first day of camp. In case you missed some of these little tidbits that came out, Mike Tomlin wore white for the first time. And as far as I can remember, he's usually all in black. And that made a lot of news. And I really hope it comes out at some point that Tomlin did that just to mess with all of the media members. The other thing is Tomlin announced on his players reported yesterday to camp, and Tomlin announced in his press conference last night that Cordarrelle Patterson is suffering from a hamstring injury. So it sounds like he's not going to be starting out right away. It is something that happened not football related during a training session. There's also news that came out just about 5 minutes ago that George Pickens and Zach Anzani, the wide receivers coach, got into it today at the end of practice. Apparently, coach wasn't happy with something that Pickens did. They got into a heated argument. Other wide receivers got involved. And the report says from Ray Fittipaldo says that Pickens was visibly upset after all of that happened. The last thing is Russell Wilson didn't practice this morning. Everybody with a lot of anticipation there to see him. Apparently had some cramping in his calf muscle or something. Mike Tomlin said that it wasn't a big deal. You know, they're kind of going at his own pace because he's a veteran. He was seen after practice was overthrowing the ball around some, but that did give an opportunity. People were excited to see Justin Fields there stepping up a little bit more and taking some reps today for the first day. Back to you, Ray.
All right. Guys, again, training camp has started. Christmas Day in July is here. I'm loving every minute of it. And we're going to talk about training camp. Guys, where should I start?
Well, there were some
I can
surprises.
start anywhere, bro. I can start anywhere, really. Zach.
Maybe we should start with I agree with Zach. The offensive line surprises were
okay. Let's go that route. Offensive line. Nick Herbig. He is taking. He's with the first team, taking the first team snaps. Here's a lineup right here: Dan Moore at left tackle, Isaac Simalu at left guard, Nate Herbig center, James Daniels right guard, and Broderick Jones at right tackle. Guys, you know, that looks pretty solid. Now, of course, you know, there's
solid.
Solid?
That looks
Bob's
solid.
not gonna like that. Bob, there we go already.
No, let me finish. Let me finish. It's pretty solid, given the fact that, well, despite the history of Dan Moore Jr., we all know. I mean, we're not a big fan of him, but
that looks solid if we're trying to tank. Might as well roll Kyle Allen out as the starting quarterback.
But are any of you surprised? Like, are you surprised by this? Because the talk all summer has been that they would have Troy Fautanu, like they did with Broderick Jones last year, take his time coming in and allowing Dan Moore to start. I mean, that's kind of what everybody's predicted. So I got to be honest, while I don't love it, I wasn't really surprised by it. Are you surprised?
Well, I'm really surprised with the fact that Broderick is on the right side. All we've heard is Broderick's going to be on the left side. Broderick's going to be on the left side. I mean, honestly, I would rather have a swinging Rusty Gate on the left side than Dan Moore. They might actually stop somebody.
Yeah, I was going to say more people get confused by turnstiles than Dan Moore.
But Bob, here's the thing. Now, when they drafted Broderick Jones, Dan Moore in the offseason, I mean, he worked his ass off. I mean,
so what? He's still
no. But here's the thing: he worked his ass off. He started, you know, the first few games. He was pretty good. Then it fell off.
He was not pretty good.
Again, you know,
he was not pretty good. The San Francisco game was a disaster.
Well, that's one game. Yeah.
He was. That was. It was all the. I mean, Dan Moore is a disaster. I would have rather had Chooks on the right and the left, no matter
Oof.
what Chooks said. It's Dan Moore is not a left tackle on a playoff caliber team.
Bob, I'm going to ask you this question: has Dan Moore played any worse than the San Francisco game last year? Has he played any worse?
He played awful.
Okay.
He can't.
Was it awful all season long?
Look,
I'll
make this very clear to you, Ray. Dan Moore can't block the run, but he offsets that by giving up multiple sacks.
With the exception of Myles Garrett, because he played him pretty good.
Myles Garrett dominated him last year. You can't even say that anymore.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, Dan Moore in the beginning, he starts out okay, but as the season progresses, he does diminish in his play. And I'm going to say it right now. I said probably by week 4 there will be a shift. I would say
Pat Myers should be fired today.
We'll go to left tackle.
Pat Myers should be fired today. Arthur Smith should be ashamed of himself, rolling out Dan Moore and the left tackle. I understand, okay, Zach Frazier, the rookie, maybe you're not sure how he's going to play. I can kind of forgive the Nate Herbig thing. The Dan Moore thing, I do not forgive. Broderick Jones should be the left tackle. That's all we've heard since the season ended. Change? Okay, Mike Tomlin wore white. I guess that's the change we're going to get promised on this offensive line. This is ridiculous. Dan Moore has said he can't play the right side. So now you're going to make sure of the fact that Troy Fautanu, who's relegated to the second team, okay, so we're not going to play Broderick Jones on the left. Obviously, we're not going to have Troy Fautanu on the field. I mean, what's it going to take the first preseason game to get Russell Wilson hurt before we decide that maybe we should play the first round draft pick from last season in his natural position?
At this point, I think I agree with Leon. This not only should there have been no surprise here, I think everyone should have just expected this, because until Fautanu proves anybody any different, right now the Steelers have a blueprint that says we bring in a rookie, then we have Dan Moore in front of them. Whenever it's time, we switch. And because it worked last year, nothing in that front office is going to say we need to switch this up, because unless Fautanu and Fautanu has had minicamp, he's had time with the other guys. He's had time. If in that time he didn't blow anybody out of the water, this is the responsible way to go forward with it.
It is not
players earn their stripes. They don't just throw them in there. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. With rare exception, do they just toss them in there? And I think when we have, a lot of times it's a disaster, like Kendrick Green.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. Broderick Jones earned his stripes. Broderick Jones is supposed to be the left tackle.
I agree, but I mean, the thing is how are they going to put him there when you've got Dan Moore stomping his foot and screaming and yelling that he can't play there? I mean, I don't know what else they're supposed to do, but I worry about how confusing this is for the players, because if your goal is still to get him back at left tackle, and now you're bringing him in to start the season off in the wrong position, like how do you ever make that transition with him? Like, and then you're moving Fautanu to the other side. I mean, it feels confusing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot overstate enough with this. Everything we were led to believe all got shot apart the first day of training camp.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just a day one. But I mean, bottom line is Troy Fautanu is not a blindside tackle.
Yeah,
he was the left tackle at Washington, but Michael Penix was left-handed.
Right.
So it is the perfect time to say, Broderick, you're our blindside guy. That's established, and let Dan Moore and Fautanu fight it out on the right side. If Dan Moore can't play there, that's his fault. Us throwing away the season, which is exactly what it will be if Dan Moore starts one game at left tackle, we might as well just tank.
Oh no!
We put all these resources into the offensive line, and now we're not going to use them. Pat Myers should be gone. Arthur Smith should apologize, and Mike Tomlin should be fired if Dan Moore plays left tackle.
I'm not clear on how Bob really feels about this. Can anybody break it down for me?
I think that's a kind of a blinders on way to look at it, because what you're assuming is Poatano is the second coming of everybody. Well, I think if it gets to that point and Dan Moore starts, it means Poatano was not as game ready as we thought.
I will say this, the Steelers never promised us we'd see anything. The Steelers never made any promises. All they talked about was, you know, that they want versatility, that they're in awe of these guys' versatility and adaptability, and that was what they wanted out of their offensive line. And then that the plan was to get him, Broderick Jones, moved back to his natural spot. So
there is no plans that I have heard of, or I'm aware of, or should happen, where Dan Moore is re-signed after this season.
No.
Which means
no, he shouldn't be. He should not be.
This is his contract year. Broderick Jones is better than Dan Moore. So the fact that the fact that you're not playing your best player on the left side where he belongs means that, okay, well, Dan Moore, sorry, you know, we're just stuck. We got to play you at left tackle again. This is the saying you put players in pads kind of change. This is coaching malpractice. I cannot overstate enough how disappointed I am. I would rather Spencer Anderson be at right tackle right now than if you don't believe Fatanu is going to be the guy.
Bob, this is day one. This is day one. It may change. I'm saying your frustration, and believe me, I believe we are all in agreement with this right here. Dan Moore isn't the man. He's not. He should be gone. And I believe he's there because for experience.
What experience? It's bad experience. When is Broderick Jones going to get experience?
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but Bob, hear me out. It's day one. It's day one. Let's give it time.
It's not day one. It's day one of Broderick Jones' second season.
Hey, don't jump off the ledge yet.
Yeah, I think we have to
jump off the ledge if this coaching staff believes for 1 second that Dan Moore is better than Broderick Jones. That means that Broderick Jones is a bust.
Bob, that's the problem. You're looking at it from a wrong angle. You're assuming that the coaching staff is doing this because Dan Moore is the best, rather than there be an actual plan. I guarantee the entire coaching staff, whenever they're by themselves, say, so we can start this meeting off by saying we're not re-signing Dan Moore, right? Everyone agrees and they carry on with their meeting. It is 100% guaranteed Dan Moore is not a starting left tackle on the Steelers or anywhere in the NFL. That is a full agreement. But I am saying we are dangerously close to bringing the Kenny Pickett effect back in, but being on the other side of it. What I'm saying is, because I'm going into this saying we have had an offseason with more good than bad, a lot of things we've been asking for. So at the very least, I should put a little bit of faith that Mike Tomlin's backed up, and this is a bunch of coaches doing what they do best. Because otherwise I'm going to be right where I am right now, wishing I would have kept my eyes open for this preseason. I wish I would have gone back and rewatched any of Kenny Pickett's snaps from last season, because I would have automatically said, wait a second, this is not a good preseason. I'm choosing to believe this is because they've seen enough to say Broderick Jones is going to hit the ground running. Now, we need to see more out of the guys we don't know about. This is not a put the guys that are going to start. This is we need to see more out of Dan Moore, so put him there. We need to see more out of Troy Fautanu, switch him out to here. We need to see more out of Nate Herbig. We know Zach Frazier is good. What do we have in Herbig? So I think it's that, rather than everyone assuming that these guys are better than the people behind.
I think that's a really fair point about Nate Herbig, because we really haven't seen what he's got at that position. Do you know what I mean? In any kind of fashion. And so, you know, I think it's valid to give him a shot. There's a part of me that wonders that if this isn't just the mix around, you know what I mean? They started out today with Dan Moore, you know, maybe they're going to switch around sides another day, or do you know what I mean? Or maybe this is just the box checking that, you know, we put our guys through the paces, but then that doesn't answer Bob's point as to what's going on with Broderick Jones and why he isn't in his right place. I mean, in my mind, I agree with Bob in the sense that I think you put Broderick Jones where he's supposed to be, and then you have the other two battle it out for that other position, which seemed to be what everybody was indicating would happen this season. And then, you know, like, may the best man win. But I don't know. I mean, all I can do is hope is that this is like, this is temporary. But like then I said before, then I worry about how bad is that for the players when you're shifting them all around all the time? Is Jones really going to be a swing player like Nick Harbaugh, whatever his name is, said?
If on day 3 we're still here, then I will start to slide to Bob's side. Whereas if day 3 nothing has changed and we've seen this rotation, then I will start to say, you know what? But day 1 opening, it's kind of a let's throw a little bit against the wall, see what sticks. Maybe something will jump out. If nothing does, let's go back to that. I have to assume that's what it is. I mean, Mike Tomlin's in white. What does that say?
Round table question. How many rookies that have been drafted by the Steelers have come out just start, day 1, let alone be the first team in practice in training camp?
Pouncey?
Marquise Pouncey.
1.
Pouncey.
David DeCastro.
Castro. Okay, good. Guess what? For what I saw from or heard from Frazier today, he was a rookie today. He wasn't bad. He was a rookie today.
But my point is, I mean, Pittsburgh normally goes the experience with the veterans. So
TJ Watt,
huh?
Yeah.
TJ Watt,
Offense.
George Pickens.
I do think it's typically situational, though. Do you know what I mean? It's like I think it's hard to say for them to say that this is always our rule and we follow it, because you're right. We just listed a whole bunch of players that they left start, but then you look at other times like
Johnson,
Cam Hayward, and he didn't. Do you know what I mean? He came in, but he was on the bench a lot when that
Joey Porter Jr. had to earn a bit.
So, yeah, Joey Porter Jr. I mean, we were sucking at times, and Porter was sitting on the bench, and fans were going nuts, about why wasn't he coming in?
Yeah, look, I'm all for a second round pick having to earn his spot. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
Your first round draft pick that you traded up to get, you played out of position his first year. You then spent the offseason saying he's our left tackle. Don't worry, he's going back where he belongs. Omar Khan has said this. And then Pat Meyer, Matt Canada's offensive line coach, starts out with Dan Moore on the left side. This is exactly why I did not want any of the Matt Canada assistants retained.
Well, my question is, do we know how the delegation works in an Arthur Smith offense? We've been going off inept, incompetent people who don't know how to run an offense, let alone delegate. For all we know, it could go literally top down. It could be Arthur Smith saying, here is what I need in my offense. Pat, you need to make this work. So you might be mad at Arthur Smith today. I mean, I'm
mad at Arthur Smith too.
Bob's mad at everybody.
Yeah, I'm mad.
Bob, I understand your frustration. And again, I see it. I see what you're saying. I believe that in this case here, Dan Moore is on the shortest leash.
There's no evidence that he should get a leash.
Yeah, he doesn't deserve a leash.
Now, let me clarify. I am not pleased about the situation, but the firing of Canada, the hiring of Smith, the good draft, the Steelers have invested in my bank of trust to the point where at this point I'm like, I don't agree, but go for it. And then if it gets to the point where I'm like, okay, now we are not to that point. We are not close to Canada upset yet. We should not.
You guys know me. I'm the fan who's like, we're going to win 15 games this season every year. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm such a Pollyanna for my team. I love them so much. I don't ever want to speak bad things into existence. So like Zach, there is a part of me that's like, I got to trust this process a little bit. You know what I mean? And hope that these people who got this job know more than I do. And it's going to, you know what I mean? At some point, something's going to happen that makes this make sense to me, a method to the madness. But I definitely can see like both sides. I can understand why, particularly about Broderick Jones, less about Troy Fautanu, but particularly about Broderick Jones.
What I'll say is,
why did we keep Dan Moore if he's so freaking incompetent? He can't play where we need him to play. Then why did we keep him? Because he could have easily found somebody that was just as good as Dan Moore that could play the other side of the field in the offseason. So why did you even keep him if he can't give you what you need? If Peterson couldn't give us what we needed, we let him go.
Well, here's the thing: when the game starts, I mean, I will root for all of these guys as hard as can be, but there is zero, and I mean zero, evidence over the last 5 seasons that we know even an iota of what we're doing on offense. Our offense has gotten progressively worse, and now you roll out the guy who we spent first round draft picks on 2 tackles, and you roll out with the guy going into his second year, who is your probably best offensive lineman outside of Isaac Seumalo, and you play him out of position with Matt Canada's offensive line coach. The only 2 coaches who were not on the staff last year on offense are Arthur Smith and Zach Azzanni. Azzanni gets in a fight with Pickens today. That could be a good thing. Arthur Smith lets Matt Canada's offensive line coach roll out what Matt Canada probably would have rolled out. And the really scary thing, to Zach's point, if Dan Moore or if Troy Fautanu is so bad at right tackle that we are back to having to play Dan Moore, who can't play the right side, on the left side, and Broderick Jones on the right side, the season's shot.
Let's fix that verbiage. At no point did I say he was bad, because if you're saying that, you're saying when Joey Porter started last season, he was bad at cornerback. What I'm saying is he's not ready to start an NFL. No, if we get to that point, he's not game ready. I do not think it's bad. I do see a very logical place where I am, and Bob's not going to like this. He's going to get mad. I have a 2-game grace period where I will not freak out if Dan Moore is the starting on our offensive line. But I'll say
starting left tackle on our offensive line.
Like I said, I cannot go back to as angry as I was last season. I need to start this season from a better place. My soul needs it.
We have to
I think my heart needs it too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You know, we're going to talk some about those expectations, and I'm trying to temper those expectations this year.
I think it's a perfect time to segue into Najee Harris, who also doesn't know what his role is in this offense.
Yeah, he's also confused. Do you believe that?
I think he knows his role
better than that.
He's looking at the money to me. He
said yesterday. So why did they tell you that they didn't extend you? And he's like, let me think about it. You know what I mean? And then he's like, oh, because they're not sure about the offense or whatever.
And then Mike Tomlin refused, just seemed like, oh well, if that's what I understand that he might think
if that's what he said happened, then that's what happened. Like, what is that? Which I didn't totally expected from Mike Tomlin. I didn't expect him to say anything different. But I thought it was an interesting answer from Harris, because it almost like the let me think about it is like, what am I going to come up with to tell you? He clearly didn't want to talk to the media at first. He circumvented them by walking across the lawn rather than hitting the sidewalk. But then, like we said, when we pre-met about him going around and fist bumping all the Steelers people, do you know what I mean? So he's obviously got this rapport. And then I saw several people report today on Twitter that were there, Chris Carter, and I can't remember if the other one was Chris Adamski, about how Naj was out there being normal Najee, like giving it 100%, working his hardest, cheering his teammates on, positive attitude.
Yeah, I heard that he was like George Pickens made a really good catch, and Najee from the sideline was the first one. Yeah. But I also saw that this is typical Najee at training camp. So I don't know if it's as much an increase from before. This might just be Najee getting back into who he is in football season. I'm trying not to get my hopes up, because what I see is this is Najee's audition for other teams, and I need to accept that and then be happy if something else happens. So I want him to do great. I want us to reap the benefits of him doing great, but I'm preparing myself to let go.
I don't think professionals when they're on the field are caught up in the contract stuff. I mean, maybe a guy like Deontay, who let it really get to him. Yeah. But I mean, as far as a professional, I mean, I think they're going to be enthusiastic and excited. I'm not knocking Najee. I'm sure it was. Yeah. What I'm saying is, I think it's genuine what he's doing on the field.
Agreed.
I don't think he's going to get sullen and upset about his contract until he walks off the practice field into a sea of media who then start asking him, hey, should you get a contract?
Yeah, just hammering him about it. I agree with you. I mean, I do think that there's, we always say that any player that's under contract, you're Dan Moore, doesn't matter who it is. Even we talked about it with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Like, they're on 1-year contracts. You know what I mean? They're going to give it all they've got because it is this audition for the rest of your career. And so I do think Najee's in that position, but I also believe that both things can be true. So you can be doing everything you can because in the back of your mind, you kind of know that you may have to be talking to other teams, but you can also say, like, I'm here now and I want this team to win a Super Bowl and I'm going to do everything I freaking can to make that happen. Do you know what I mean? And so I kind of see like both things can be true. I think I agree with you. I think it's a business. I think Najee Harris went to Alabama. He knows that better than a lot of players. And, I think Nick Saban does a really good job preparing his players for it's not personal.
Right. I'm going to switch things here for a second. In breaking news, Leanne, you talked about George Pickens getting into the receivers coach, Azandi. Okay, thank you. Azandi is well respected. He has developed some great receivers in the league. My question to you is, do you believe, in light of this little tit for tat here, this little fight, do you think that George Pickens has backslid? Because we've seen in the offseason that he has matured. He has gotten better. He's more of a team player. Do you believe that he backslid a little bit?
I don't, and this is why, because I think that somebody like George Pickens, a lot like Najee Harris, is under like a microscope from fans. So every little thing he does is going to be like, I don't want to say blown out of proportion, but like increased, magnified. Do you know what I mean? If another Quez Watkins had gotten upset and maybe had a few words, I don't think anybody would think much of it. But because Pickens has shown in the past, people feel like he has some maturity issues. I feel like maybe, those are people are looking for things like that to happen with him.
I agree. I think I don't know where the line is, but I know when it comes to number one receivers, you want a certain amount of that. You want some pushback. Because you can't, like we're talking about cornerbacks, it's the same receivers. You can't play that position at the level George Pickens wants to without believing you're the best at what you do and you should get the ball every time. So it's not just him being a diva. He legitimately believes during that play he was the best choice for the quarterback to throw the ball. And so if this happens every single day for the next 2 weeks, and it just seems to be grating, we'll deal with it. This, I think, is a positive. I know Mike Tomlin likes a little dust up every once in a while. So he likes the competition.
Azani's got to come in and exert his authority. Do you know what I mean? Mike Tomlin did it when he took over for Bill Cowher. They said that first season that he was head coach, it was miserable. That training camp was awful because he wanted them to know, you have to respect me. And I've heard that about Azani, that he's that kind of coach. So maybe this is, he's going to be extra hard in the beginning to establish that respect, especially with somebody who's a little bit of a knucklehead.
Well, he's known as a disciplinarian. That's true. Him getting in with Pickens in the first day, it's not a surprise. Calvin Austin said during OTAs that he doesn't play and all this stuff. But, Ray, don't act like Zach Azani has some great resume. I mean, he's a disciplinarian, which the Steelers desperately need in the wide receiver room. But he coached Denver's wide receivers. I think he's produced one Pro Bowler in all of his time as coaching wide receivers, 4 years in Denver, 1 year with the Bears.
But he's well respected. He's well respected in the college ranks. That's how he got bumped up to pros.
Yeah, Matt Canada was well respected in the college ranks. I don't care about college.
That's a punch in the gut right there, Bob. That's a good point. That's a punch in the gut, but good one.
Yeah. But let's face it. Does he seem like a good young upcoming coach? Yeah, he does. Yes. And if he does a good job in Pittsburgh, he'll probably parlay that in an offensive coordinator job somewhere. But yes, we want to see. Okay, Pickens, we don't want you to fall into any bad habits you've already had. But he's 3 years down the road. It's equally possible that if you go too disciplinarian with Pickens, that he just goes, hey, I'm your number one wide receiver. What are you going to do, bench me?
Right.
It's a fine line. The first day of training camp, and it'll happen in pads too. Will there be fights and dust-ups and everything else? I don't think we should read too much into that. I think there's a very large anti-Pickens sentiment among the fan base. So any thought that they're putting him in his place, guys, I got news for you. If George Pickens isn't our number one, and Omar Khan said today they're not really close or looking to do any kind of trade, you're looking at Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin. A slight, and I mean a slight improvement over Dan Moore at left tackle.
Well, we don't know what we're gonna get out of Roman Wilson yet, so don't forget his name.
He's kind of the dark horse for me, and I like that a little bit. So I hope it's a good thing. Do you know what I mean? I hope between Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin, we see a bit more. I'm hoping that Calvin Austin has had the tumblers click in his brain. Do you know what I mean? And we saw some, like, that play against the Raiders from him was like 70 some yards. I mean, that was fantastic. But then it's crickets for a whole big chunk of time. So hopefully, he's been able to sync that up into some kind of consistency.
I don't blame that on Austin either, by the way. I think the injury you can't blame him for. I think he played about as well as he could in his role last year, which was basically, we're going to jet sweep you and let you run down the middle.
Well, with the crummy offensive line, I mean, it's right back to the same excuse that is valid for every other person on that offense. Do you know what I mean? Messy quarterback play, terrible play calling, a terrible offensive coordinator, and a crummy offensive line or a half crummy offensive line. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, to me, I think all of that speaks to some of the struggles that all of those wide receivers had. They were all frustrated.
I know we're going to talk about this more in detail in a minute, but I'm curious from all three of you, crazy conspiracy theory. They put Dan Moore out there. They get into it with George Pickens because the worse the weapons are, the worse the offensive line is. What quarterback benefits or could possibly produce more with a broken down system like he had in Chicago?
Oh, that really is a conspiracy theory. Oh, that.
I hope not.
Which quarterback?
I'm not even against, like, I'd love to see Fields play some. Like, I'm not even like anti-Fields. You know what I mean? If he worked out to be the best quarterback, I'd be good with that. Yeah. But I don't want to see it happen that way. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to see it happen that way.
I would hope that we're not devolving into the Saints from a while ago, where we're going to
or the Bears,
a back alley team.
The Broncos.
So I will counter that about the Dan Moore thing, and maybe the reason that he's starting at this point is because Leanne said we backed ourselves into a corner with Dan Moore. We were like, we're gonna keep him. Everyone's like, he's terrible, and now we have to give him one last try. And it could be, okay, Dan Moore, here's your last chance, and these next few days will determine it. I'm trying to make sense of it. The
Steelers media all swear that the organization likes him. Like they not, and I don't mean like as a human being. I'm sure he's a lovely human being, but they like him as a player, and I don't understand it. I mean, I don't know that I hate him quite as much as Bob does. I think he's outplayed his draft selection. Do you know what I mean? Which is saying something, but that doesn't mean that he's been as good as Broderick Jones, was at the end of last season, or any other offensive lineman. I mean, he's not good.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't hate him personally.
Right,
I hate his play.
When I say like him, like they mean as a player.
Yeah, I mean, according to Ben Roethlisberger, he used to help him up after he got him sacked. So, what a prince!
What a guy!
Yeah.
What a guy!
Guys, Russell Wilson, he sat out because of a calf injury, and Justin Fields took the first team reps. We got some video, Zach?
We do, yeah. We have a pass here, so it's important before we start this because it's fun overreacting. The defender covering Van Jefferson fell down, so this was pretty much a wide open pass, but we'll still watch Justin Fields pass. So we saw the safety coming over at the end. So it's what you expect out of a quarterback, just not just a quarterback. I'm talking high school, Pee Wee. Like, that's like, you're supposed to hit a guy in stride. So I understand we're happy, but
I think what they're saying too about Wilson is it was a cramp, so not like an actual injury, but like he was crampy.
Yeah.
To give credit, what the videos from Baco, right, on Twitter?
Yes,
BAKU.
Yeah. Baco, who had great videos all day long.
Yeah.
So very much appreciated.
He always does good ones.
I know it's kind of premature to really judge Justin Fields right now. We know that he's going to be second string behind Russell Wilson.
Well, not everyone believes that, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, yeah.
Since you brought that up.
Right there, Chase Daniel making a big statement.
Yep.
He's not the only one. Ryan Clark has said it too, that he believes that Justin Fields will be the quarterback before the end of the year. He believes Russell Wilson will start, but he doesn't think he'll keep the job. There's been several media members that have said as much.
Lewis Riddick also really.
Yeah. I'm going to write this right now. Write this down. By which week you think Justin Fields will take over as starter for the rest of the season? But I'm going to write it down.
I predict
good prediction.
I don't think he will. Barring injury, other than an injury, I do not think Justin Fields. So no.
I agree with Zach. I don't think he will. I agree unless somebody gets injured. Yeah. I just don't see Russell Wilson screwing up that badly that he'll get benched. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'll be a little contrarian if it happens, and I'm also, just to be fair, I don't think it will. But if it happened, I agree with Dave from Steelers Sanctuary last week that it would happen in the bye week. There's no way. Although from an injury standpoint, if Dan Moore's your left tackle, there's a real possibility Kyle Allen will be playing.
Maybe that's the plan. Maybe the plan is to get there's your what do you call it? Your conspiracy theory. Do you know what I mean? The plan to play Moore is so that Wilson gets injured and they put in Justin Fields.
Yeah, I was worried about Kyle Allen's safety in the preseason with Dan Moore. Now we got to worry about Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Kyle Allen.
Well, we have another pass from Fields that. Oh, go ahead. What was that, Leanne? Go for it. Oh, no,
my only concern is that with Wilson is will he play good enough to keep the job, but not good enough for us to really make a serious run in the playoffs? You know what I mean? And that's a little bit what worries me is like how good will he play? Because I think that Tomlin will have a hard time benching him if we're winning games.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But not that overachieving that you need to make it through a playoff run.
If Wilson gets the Steelers to the playoffs, you got to ride with Wilson all the way.
100%.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I agree with what Leanne says. That we have to look like an offense that if our defense folds against Kansas City, we can keep up with them offensively. Because that's the real. I would hope that our defense would do what it does and try to lock down. But in the playoffs lately, we haven't done that. We've allowed a lot of playoff points. So if we're going to win, we got to put up 35, 40. So
I said it before. I mean, I believe 28 is the magic number for the offense.
Oh, that's a good. If we could average that, that'd be nice.
Yeah, but exactly. In the heyday of Ben Roethlisberger with the Killer Bees, we only averaged 25. We ain't gonna average 28 with Russell Wilson.
That'd be amazing.
And Justin Fields. I mean,
I don't see it happening.
Well, think about this. What team was it? Was it Miami put up 70 points against Denver? I believe was it.
But you do the playoffs again.
But happen in average.
But my point is, you got teams that are going to put up more points. So yes, we have to somewhat keep up with the Joneses by putting up more points. That's why I'm saying 28 is the magic number. And the defense, well, we're not going to talk about the defense, but if the offense can put up 28 points.
Yeah, but hold on, Ray.
I'll be happy.
You on previous podcasts, when we discussed Brandon Ayuk, you said you didn't want him. We're good with what we got. So now you're comparing us to Miami, who has potentially the fastest wide receiver duo in the NFL with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
Yes. And
somehow we're going to duplicate that with one wide receiver who half the fans don't like him.
I'm not saying put up 50 points, but I'm saying just the mere fact of just putting up points. We can't just keep moving the ball down the field, moving the chains. And once we get into the red zone, all we get out of it is just 3 points. It'd be 6 on the board. It has to be.
For the last 2 years, I would have been happy with 3 points. The problem was we didn't get to the red zone, and then we turned the ball over at midfield.
But now, but this is what we have to do this season. This is what
that's the problem.
Yeah.
I think because of how bad we've been offensively, a lot of people assume we need Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think if we would have scored 28 points, we would have done better than the Chiefs last season, around where Miami was. Like we don't need that. So what I'm worried about is us setting that expectation now. Getting to the season, we're scoring 20 points a game, and everyone's saying, "Well, we're not that good." We score 20 points a game with this defense, we will win 2 more games at least. We cannot expect, because that's so much pressure to put on any offense, let alone a new offense. Now, you want to turn around and say the defense has to hold offenses to like 10 to 14 points a game. I will be with you on that. This defense should do that. Our offense needs a little bit more leeway.
Yeah. I think 17 is realistic for the defense. If they can average giving up 17 points a game, and then us maybe fall into a couple of shootouts. I mean, I'd be curious to see. I mean, here's what I think is if Russell Wilson can give us the production Alex Smith gave the Chiefs before they turned to Mahomes, and I'm not saying Justin Fields is Patrick Mahomes, but if Justin Fields can be we had Alex Smith and we turned it over to Justin Fields, and then the offense takes another step up. I mean, this is not – I mean, I really hope we win a lot of games. I think we will win the AFC North, maybe win a playoff game. But I don't feel like I just feel like cornerback 2/3, wide receiver 2/3 is going to catch up with us down the road. And we're not a Super Bowl team this year. I do think Omar Khan has a plan, and I hope the plan is to fire Pat Meyer. But that being said, I do think they're building towards a plan. And I think if they can transition Russell Wilson into Justin Fields being the starter on opening day 2025, that to me, that's what I'm hoping.
This is all about developing Fields. Do you know what I mean? Like, and who better to help develop this young quarterback than Russell Wilson? Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, it's almost like a no-brainer that you have this quarterback who's had all this success in the league. He doesn't have to necessarily be that guy this year. He has to be a manager, and then he has to impart all of his knowledge on Justin Fields. Well, Justin Fields is in a functioning offense with real coaches and real weapons, and gets to actually learn how to play professional football the right way instead of the crap that he did in Chicago. And I think they're hoping that that's who he's going to be. And then if he's not, then obviously we've got to go back to the drawing board and start all over again. But that's why I really don't think there was ever a plan to really start Fields at all, or really even allow him to compete for this job, because they know that he learned all of these bad habits that he has to undo when he was in Chicago. And Ryan Clark talked about it the other day, that they're going to have to really look like psychologically at where Justin Fields is in facing the game of football with the damage that was done by Chicago.
And with this, I think I kind of see the Russell Wilson thing a little bit differently, because I see it as he kind of stared down the possible end of his career, kind of almost in flames. And now I think in his mind, he got to a point where, am I going to start again? Am I going to be a backup on another team? What's my legacy going to look like now that I've done this? But I think what happened in Pittsburgh is he realized, number one, he's with a decent organization, that if he can really put stuff together, he can have a good 1, maybe 2 years, and then leave Justin Fields as his heir apparent there, fix his legacy, get some more wins. And so I think a lot of what people saw in Denver and all the negatives, I think people are hanging that on him still. And I don't feel that's the Russell Wilson we have right now. Now he has to prove that, but I honestly feel we have a different Russell Wilson that is ready to do what it takes to not just start for the Steelers this year, but to prepare Justin Fields to start later, which is a rarity in a quarterback. So
well, Zach, because again, the Steelers are one of the most well-respected organizations in all of sports, and I remember an interview with Marquise Pouncey, but on the Pivot. And he said about Mike Tomlin, he's going to treat you like a man, with respect in public. Now, behind closed doors, if you mess up, he's going to let you have it. And that's something that Mike Tomlin, to his credit, has stuck with from the time he walked in the door. And so, again, it was pretty bad with Russell Wilson and Sean Payton in Denver, how he just basically berated him in public. So
no, he didn't, Ray. He just benched him. He didn't come out and say bad things about Wilson. He just said, I'm going in a different direction.
But did you see the exchange on the sidelines?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, that was uncalled for. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. I understand the frustration and everything, but let's dial it back a little bit. And that's something that you will not see.
So now a head coach can't correct his players on the sideline?
You can.
And Travis Kelce got in Andy Reid's face. I mean, I think if you win, then you're allowed to do that. They weren't winning, so you can't. That's the difference. If Russell Wilson was winning and got in his face, we just say that, it was a middle of the game aggressive, kind of heat of the battle thing like Kelce had. Yeah, but he's losing, so.
And see, Kelce. I mean, in my book, Kelce should have been fined.
Oh, no, see, I'm fine. For me, it's unreal. I go back to Richard Sherman in the NFC Championship game when they interviewed him right after, and then people got incredibly upset. I'm like, what do you expect? You ask these people to raise themselves to a literal battle level, and then you're saying, by the way, directly afterwards, now you have to react back and you have to talk to us, and you have to be respectful about it. That's what. Do what you want. Walk out. Mike Tomlin is a coach. I think that's a little different. But you're a player. You don't answer a question, get mad about it if it's directly afterwards. You're allowed to have emotions.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk to a player, give him an hour and then go talk to him. So in this case, especially in the middle of that, I want that stuff from Russell Wilson if he's losing. I want him to get angry. I don't want the, ride, baby, ride if we're losing. I want him to show that he's angry about it.
So, Ray, you're not okay with Peyton getting on Russell Wilson on the sideline after he basically lost the game for him. But were you okay with Cushenberry wanting to fight Wilson on the sideline? Because that's his center. That's his teammate.
I believe there is a threshold. There's a level. And again, I have no problem with a coach getting on a player on their performance on the field. I have no problem with that.
Well, what do you think Sean Payton was getting on him for?
The way
he just lost the game for him.
The way he came at him, I mean, that was a little bit over the top in my book. That was a little bit over the top.
I don't know. I mean, if you're old enough to remember Bill Cowher, I'm sorry, but Bill Cowher was 10 times more aggressive than Sean Payton was, and his players didn't come back at him. His players were like,
yes, sir.
I'm sorry.
But okay, you're talking two different eras. And here's the thing. This is the era.
Sean Payton is from that era.
This is the era of the quarterback, Bob. And here's the thing. Quarterbacks these days, they are divas.
Well, I'm telling you right now, I was sitting in the rain 10 rows back from when the Steelers played the Jaguars, when Cordell Stewart was the quarterback, and he yanked Cordell Stewart in the pouring rain, and I listened to Cowher unleash obscenities for 10 minutes on him on the sideline in his face, telling him, how can you play this bad? Okay, so I don't fault that. I mean, barring striking the player, I don't fault that. And Russell Wilson, last season, in Sean Payton's offense, he cost him a game. He got in his face, and that was the end of it. He didn't even bench him the next game. It was a few games later.
But Bob, do you agree with me on this? Today's quarterbacks are divas. They have
I think
not all of them, no.
But I don't think I don't think that maybe we say that the league has changed some and coaches aren't as aggressive as they used to be. Like that, I think is a fair statement to make. But I don't think it's fair to say that quarterbacks are divas now, and so therefore we must handle them with kid gloves or treat them differently than we treat other people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that seems reasonable. Do you know what I mean? That's how some coaches coach.
You can't tackle below the knees. You can't pick them up and throw them down. You gotta be careful.
That's way different.
Something that causes
at this point.
The NFL rules and the way it and that's what I'm talking about Russell Wilson things still being hung on it. Because I'll say this, I did not like Tom Brady, and I called him a diva. I don't think Tom Brady was. I think he whined a little bit, but I don't think I would hang diva on him when he played. And plus, he won. If he wants to be a diva, he can be a diva. Terrell
As
Owens
well
was
as
a
he did,
diva.
you can get away with an awful lot.
So I think there's a
say it again. Say it again.
Huh?
Say it again.
I said, when you play as well as he did, you can get away with an awful lot.
That's right.
I mean, they said it today. Listen, I listened to Cam Hayward was talking about training camp. Or no, it was, I'm sorry, I take it back. It was Arthur Motes and Terrence Garvin were talking yesterday about training camp and like guys showing up and all this stuff. And a fan wrote in and said, do you guys really have to stay there like at night? Like, do you really have to stay, or could you go slip away and stay somewhere else? And Garvin said, that depends on who you are. He's like, if you're Antonio Brown, can you go stay at a hotel somewhere else for the night? Maybe, you know, with a lady or something. He's like, yeah. He's like, but if you're not making the catches Antonio Brown made, he's like, then no, you got to stay overnight. He's like, so, you know, the rules aren't equal.
If Russell Wilson would have taken Denver deep into the playoffs both of the last years, we wouldn't even be talking about whether Russell Wilson was a diva or not. We would be saying how he fulfilled the contract that he was signed to do, and the way he wants to act, he's earned that.
He'd still be in Denver.
So the second the losing start, like last year, if we would have been like an over the top awesome thing, George Pickens is another receiver that, you know, should act like we were losing. So we got on the guys for how they were. Winning takes a lot of the sting and the taint away from things. So it matters.
So guys, before we get to the end of our show today, which is going to rapidly approach on us, I do have something that Zach brought up that I really want to talk about. And that is kind of managing our expectations as fans this year. Do you know what I mean? I thought it was a really interesting point that Zach brought up. So I want us to talk about that a little bit. Zach, why don't you kick us off with what you were thinking?
Well, I had this sneaking suspicion that we all had the wool pulled over our eyes last year, and that we weren't actually duped, and it wasn't a perfect preseason from Kenny Pickett. So I went back. Now, I ended up watching every single Kenny Pickett snap from the preseason about 25 or 30 times. But the first time I watched it, I could already see that we were lied to. That Kenny Pickett was a lie on the Steel City Rings TikTok. I did a little thing the other day that was, we would have taken away all the information we needed that Kenny Pickett wasn't the guy. He was rolling out into things that was causing him injuries later in the season. He was misreading pass rushes. He was focusing in on singular reads. And during those games, the 6 or 7 possessions in 3 games that he played? Because who was it? You said Foster said that he just didn't. Was it Ramon Foster that they didn't get enough snaps, or was it Ben?
Yeah. I know Ramon Foster said that. Yeah.
Yeah, we scored some, but so what I took from that is, coming into this preseason, I really don't care about the results. I don't care about the scoring. I don't care about the records, which you shouldn't in preseason anyway. But last year, I think we really did. I think we were all so worried.
It was so exciting.
It was, and I look back, and the running game was exciting, and 4 of Kenny Pickett's passes were exciting. But other than that, if we would have gone back, we would have gone, oh, that was a close miss. Yeah. Oh, we should have, and we would have seen that we should have got in trouble for things that we didn't get in trouble for. So this year, like with Dan Moore starting out, I'm like, I think that's a bad move. I'm gonna wait because it's just I don't have a defibrillator on hand to get upset that often. So my expectation, it's a Kenny Pickett effect. I think I called it on Twitter. I have to call every time I'm going to get too excited or too down on something. Yeah. I need to wait at least until the second preseason game.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because that's very similar to and people killed him for it last year. When Ben Roethlisberger brought it up, he said the offense is not getting enough time in the preseason. You know, it's nice and well and good. They're scoring every time they touch the ball, but they need to face some adversity. They need to have a 3rd and 9, you know, not just boom, 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 go down the field. You know, part of that maybe is because, you know, with the reduced preseason, you don't want to get guys hurt. So I understand that you gotta have a balance. But I mean, Pat Mahomes took more snaps than Kenny Pickett did in the preseason last year. So, you know, maybe
good stat.
You know, maybe Ben knows what he's talking about. Maybe, you know, some network should pay him half what they're paying Tom Brady to get on TV and talk.
You know, you think about it. I think about it when I think back about last preseason, from my perspective, I felt like we all wanted it so badly as fans. Like that first season with Kenny Pickett hadn't gone the way we expected.
Yeah.
You know, we thought, and we all fooled ourselves into saying, well, this offseason, he's going to be the first team quarterback. He'll get all these reps. You know what I mean? And if he'd had that last year, if he'd been the one that had prepared with the first team, he would have been ready for it. So I think that we all tricked ourselves, or at least I did, into believing that if he had that opportunity in training camp, he would do so much better. And then I think we saw some success. And so we immediately said, okay, see, we proved our case. Look, we were right. And I think, you know, that just wasn't the case. And I think, you know, it's interesting. We talk about how Mike Tomlin runs these way more physical training camps than a lot of other teams do. And yet, when it comes down to playing the games, we see less of like our starting offense than other teams use. And it just seems like there should have been more of that to give them more experience. Like if he was really improving and the offense was really improving, then we needed to put that into some tough situations, not just have them up against their own teammates.
I'm curious, because I know when that was going on, all three of us were writing for Steeler Nation. Ray, from your perspective, when last preseason was going on, what did you get the same sense as us that it was like? I remember using the word stellar, perfect, pristine. How'd you feel when the preseason was happening?
You know, that Atlanta game, to me, I said, okay, this is it right here. We're gonna make some noise this season, and looking back, you know, you say, okay, well, did Atlanta really put forth the effort in trying to play defense? Because, you know, it was kind of like the Pro Bowl, to where you're going through the motions, but, you know, you're going to do just enough not to sustain an injury. But again, I was duped also thinking, okay, yeah, the sky's the limit. It's going to be all right. George Pickens making a great catch and everything. The offense is moving the ball, moving the chains down the field. Hey, I'm happy with that. And then here comes the regular season.
I remember thinking though, if we only play like, you know, mostly this well, do you know what I mean? Like we know we're not going to be perfect in the regular season. I mean, that's different. So if we just play mostly this well, we'll be in good shape. And yeah, that was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
I think it felt like I remember when after the 11-0 during the COVID season, that Browns game, we didn't even get a chance to be excited about it. That first snap, it was like a punch in the gut. That's how it felt with the San Francisco game. There was so much excitement going in, and it was a brick wall. It was like, oh, it was a lie. Oh no, it was a lie. And
I remember thinking we're not going to win this game, but I expected us to at least be like competitive in the game.
Right. Yeah.
And we just
my expectation for this, you know, my expectations, I just want to see good, solid play from the offensive line. And I believe everything else will take care of itself.
Well, you look at it, we open with Atlanta in Atlanta, okay? Arthur Smith just left there. There's going to be some feelings on both sides. It's going to be an intense game. Now, should we win on paper? Should we win on paper? Yes. But that's not as much of a cupcake as people think.
Right. And we plan to lose games we should win like that. I mean, for whatever reason, we've talked about this before.
And let's face it, that you got Kirk Cousins playing quarterback, not Desmond Ridder Jr.
And he was
whoever.
Fully cleared from his Achilles, like 100%. So we're not going in on a guy who's hobbled, and he's confident. I hadn't watched a quarterback on Netflix before. I popped it in. That's a confident man. Like he's really confident.
Don't you love him? Like I love him so much. I watch that quarterback show and I'm like, I can't hate this guy. And the same with that guy that plays for the Browns now. I've been watching receiver Amon.
Oh, I haven't started
Rod Brown or whatever his name is.
Amon-Ra.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a great kid! I really like him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it though. The last time we played Kirk Cousins, we were down 4 touchdowns.
Yeah,
and it took Ben Roethlisberger, you know, a furious rally in the second half just to make it look respectable.
Yeah.
And then almost pulled the game out. If Pat can hang on to the ball in the end zone, we probably win that game. Then remember, game number 2 is Denver. That's not going to be a laydown either, because Sean Payton is going to want to badly
Yeah,
beat
he's going to
Russell
want
Wilson.
to beat Russell Wilson into the ground.
And they've got a very good defense.
And he knows him. He knows Wilson.
Let's back up a little bit to the Atlanta game. It's not like Arthur Smith decided to quit and leave. He was fired. So I don't think.
Yeah, but there's
Atlanta
a lot of
really
players
with
who
chip on their shoulder too much. However, it's going to be. I think it's going to be a good competitive game dealing with 2 Chainz, Kirk Cousins.
I think there's always emotions there. I don't care if it's amicable and you leave and you go to your other team when you're playing for some other team or coaching some other team. I mean, we saw it with every person who's ever left the Steelers. You know what I mean? It's heightened emotion. I mean, the Ravens didn't want Patrick Queen, and they're already gearing up for coming into Pittsburgh and killing the kid. You know what I mean?
That's a different beast right there.
But I don't think it is. I think it's the same everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Is the whole Raven Steelers thing's more heightened? Yes, but I think for the individual players in that team, I think it's the same regardless.
But you know what?
And hold on, Ray. You got Arthur Smith, who wants to prove that the Atlanta was wrong for firing him. And you got a team full of guys who want to prove that Arthur Smith was the reason they were losing.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I think it's going to be big.
I concur. Okay. But this right here makes a good reason to really focus on the Steelers this year because, as you said, week 1 in Atlanta, homecoming for Arthur Smith. Week 2, Denver, homecoming for Russell Wilson. Then later in the season, you have homecoming for Patrick Queen with the Ravens. So,
Steelers, Ravens, that's nothing.
These storylines, these behind the scenes storylines, makes it more interesting for Steeler football. And
why the NFL does it.
Yeah, I love it. The parody, I love it.
Now, a really, really quick thing before we jump off. While we're kind of concerned about some things, all that, I did get an answer to something that I'm very glad I got an answer to. Arthur Smith's going to use a fullback. Somehow he's going to use a fullback. Like Leanne was saying, remember the name Jack Coletto. I remember the days of Dan Kreider. I was raised on that kind of blue collar. We're not going to get back there, but the idea of a real dedicated Leanne, what did they say about Jack Coletto?
He said that his nickname is the Hammer. And Jim Wexell said, make sure you remember that name because he thinks we're going to hear a lot about him this year. So he had tweeted out about him today and said, they're only full true back and make sure you remember that name. I think it's going to be interesting to watch what they do with this young man.
Zach and I were talking about this last night, and I like Coletto, and Zach is really high, and you're high on him. I think for him to make the team as the fullback, and I agree there will be a fullback option, but I think it's going to be Connor Hayward, not Jack Coletto, unless Coletto can prove he's a weapon in the passing game. Because he
caught a 1 or 2 passes today, so he was used today.
Which is good, and I think it's Connor Hayward might be playing for his job. And it may come down to Coletto versus Connor Hayward. Whoever's the best at that role makes the team, and the other guy is maybe a practice squad. I think Connor has an inside track. Zach and I were talking about this last night. Maybe you could technically carry 4 tight ends. But I really think McCole Pruitt is going to be the 3rd tight end. Because Connor has a meaningful contribution on special teams. So
I was going to say the other thing about Connor, it might come down to, with this increased focus from Omar Khan on versatility, it might come down to who's a little bit more versatile. Do you know what I mean? Who can you use in other ways? So if you could kind of use him as a fullback, you can kind of use him as a tight end. You're using him on special teams. Does that give Connor Hayward an edge over Coletto? Do you know what I mean? Or like you said, will they try to carry him as a 4th tight end? I think it'll be interesting. I think they'll be hard pressed to let Connor Hayward go, but who knows?
Well, he is entering his final year of the contract. He's too small to play tight end. He's the smallest tight end in the NFL in 50 years. He's not a good blocker at the tight end position. I think he is a good blocker in the fullback. If he can evolve into like a Kyle Juszczyk type of weapon where he's a good blocker in the backfield, catches passes, occasionally runs the ball, I think there's a real future for him in the NFL as a fullback. And I like the Coletto kid. I haven't seen as much as you guys have.
Right.
But that being said, I think that's a real competition. And I think if we go in with a 6-foot tight end, I think it was Matt Canada being cute. that he even played tight end. It's not his position. I don't think he should have converted in college.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it's in the books.
Hey, won.
Training camp is here, and we all are happy. Unless Bob's still mad about Dan Moore Jr. It's going to be all right, Bob. It's going to be all right.
He'll be seething for a bit on that.
I'll be seething until Broderick gets back to his position.
If you made it this far through the episode, please do us a favor and like, share, and subscribe. That way you'll get notified the next time Bob is going to rant about what they're doing with Dan Moore Jr. It'll pop up on your phone and be like, Bob Quinn rant alert. So we appreciate it.
And make sure you check out our daily TikToks at Steel City Rings. There'll be a lot of stuff during training camp that we'll be releasing them, but we usually do 2 or 3 a day, so you can kind of get a preview of where the episode's going, and then also reaction to instant news.
Okay, guys. Hey, thank you very much for coming back on. Again, I'm glad that we're back together. We'll be back next week with more Steeler talk in training camp. This is the 6 Steel City Rings podcast. Take care.